Well, it doesn't look like we have anyone in the waiting room, so we will go ahead and get started. Hello and welcome to, this is a designated children's literature session, even though I don't believe this particular topic is, just limited to elementary and children's literature. But the topic is going to be on the Las Vegas Writing Marathon. Just a few notes before we begin. The session is being recorded. We have 50 minutes for it. So we're going to dedicate 40 minutes to the presentation and then 10 minutes for questions. If you have any questions for our presenter, please feel free to drop them in the chat and I'll be monitoring it, and we'll have some time at the end of this for me to ask him any questions that you've got. If you have any technical issues, please feel free to direct them to our host, Larry McLeod. You can send him a message in the chat just directly to him, or if you're having a huge problem, you can do an SOS to all of us. The session, for the most part, and Ben, you are welcome to contradict me if I'm wrong about this, tends to work best if you switch your view to speaker view rather than gallery view. Ben might ask you to change that at some point. One other thing is to preserve bandwidth. We do ask that you turn off your camera and mute your mics. Ben might be asking you to turn on your camera and turn on your mics for some of the audience participation portions of this. But without further ado, I am very excited to turn this over to our presenter, Ben Koch, who is the co-director of the Nevada Writing Project.
Well, thank you very much. It is my joy to be here presenting. As Terry said, I understand that this is in the children's literature section, and I will pay special mind to ways in which you could use the activities we engage with children and with literature. I think it'll be quite obvious and exciting for you once we get started, but it is indeed applicable to all people. So quickly, just to make an introduction, my name is Ben Koch. Again, I am an assistant principal at the Adelson campus in Las Vegas, Nevada, and I'm also the co-director of the Southern Nevada Writing Project. And for those familiar with the National Writing Project, it is a national organization that has satellite writing project sites all over the world. And Southern Nevada is one of those sites, and we have been around since 1984. And so what we'll be doing today is sharing one of the traditions of the Writing Project, a writing marathon. You'll be experiencing it. We'll get to know each other a little bit better. And I think you'll leave with tools and excitement for how this could look in your own classrooms, how it could apply to literally any unit of study. And I think it'll be really a good experience. So first, I want to make sure we do some introductions. I can't see any of you right now, but I'm going to put in the chat some instructions. And so I put in the chat, it says, type a word or phrase sticking with you from today's session so far today, and what location you're joining us from this afternoon. Now, here's a choice. If you're able to come off of mute and turn your camera on, I'd love just to see your face and hear from you, but I understand that might not be possible for all of you. So I'd ask if you could either turn your camera on and we'll let you introduce yourself and share that with us together collectively. And if you're not able to come off of mute and turn your camera on, then if you could just type it in the chat. So we'll wait for some messages to show up in the chat, or for some of you to come off of camera and share your introduction. Thank you, Jay Bryce. I'm excited to know we have some Las Vegans in here. And certainly I hope you'll learn a little bit about the Writing Project's approach to writing during this session. And I'm really eager to learn more. Perhaps Nikki is a person I know, learning a little bit more about what it means to amplify joy and how that showed up today. and award-winning nonfiction books from my classroom. And I'm just very excited to consider at the end of this session ways in which the tool we use today could be used for nonfiction units. I think the connection will be really obvious. Terry, I saw you turned your camera back on. Did you want to share words sticking with you with us in person, not via the chat?
Certainly. Something that is sticking with me from the different sessions that I've had the chance to go to is navigating the world.
Awesome. Thank you. And also, Christine, I'm glad you're here with us today, also from Las Vegas. And I'm excited to share with you one of our favorite traditions, the writing marathon, that's exciting to do as professionals and also exciting to do with students. So as we get going, I did want to share with everybody that there is an agenda for today. And you can open it now or you can open it later. But the links to all of the resources that we'll be using, I'll put them in the chat as well, but it is in that agenda. So I wanted to make sure everybody had access to that. So as we're continuing along, I wanted you to know that a writing marathon is an activity where writers of any age, could be student writers or adult writers or teachers as writers, will walk around an area or physically go to locations and they'll write. And so I've had the privilege with the National Writing Project here in Las Vegas to do writing marathons at the Springs Preserve, which is a nature preserve, to do them on the Las Vegas Strip, at the airport or other locations. And you go with other writers and you observe and you write stories and you share them with one another. That was a tradition until the COVID-19 pandemic hit. And that wasn't something we were able to do. We weren't able to gather together, and we certainly weren't able to go out into places. And so the national network started a program called Write Across America. And so all of last summer, each week, a different city with a writing project would host a virtual writing marathon. And that's actually continuing this summer. If you look up Write Across America with the National Writing Project, you can sign up to attend a virtual writing marathon each week in a different city around the United States. And so they use a tool called Storymap by Nightlab at Northwestern University. And it is a piece of technology we're going to be using today that allows you to virtually go and visit places. And so I'm going to share my screen now, and I'm going to show you this in action. So the story map, it looks a bit like this, and I'll put the link in just a second so you can open it on your own. But it is a visual document. And so this is our Las Vegas Writing Marathon, and there are some instructions that you can read about this in just a moment. But when you click Start Exploring, it actually will take you around different parts of Las Vegas. And so today, I'm going to invite you to explore in just a minute, but there are 6 different stops that we're going to invite you to go on. And each stop, this is the fabulous Las Vegas sign, has a brief description. It has a media opportunity. You can choose to use it or not. So for example, this is a webcam that is a live feed of the Las Vegas sign, which includes audio. And so we'd invite you, if you choose to go to this location, to, if you want to, you can watch the webcam for some inspiration. But we want to invite you just to write. And so I'll give you some time parameters. But the invitation to write would be, what might you see or hear if you visited this location? Tell a story that happens here. If you've been here before, what is a memory from this location? And then a pretty open-ended, which is, what is sparked in your mind when thinking about this site? And so we have several sites. We have the Viva Las Vegas Wedding Chapel. They have a live webcam. It's possible there's a wedding with Elvis or a T-Rex officiating happening now, and you can check that out. McCarran International Airport, which many of you who are not local may have flew into if we were having this conference in person. We have the Springs Preserve. We have the Las Vegas Community Healing Garden. And then finally, we have the Fountains of Bellagio. And so at each site, so this is our writing time. But I'm gonna invite you to browse the story map and choose one of the locations and to write. And you'll have 15 minutes to explore and to write. And when we're done, we're going to come back and we're going to share. Okay, and I'll give a little bit of details about what that sharing will look like, just so you can anticipate it. So I know a lot of us aren't on camera, and I'd really love for us to be on camera for the sharing. And if not, then there's other ways that we'll figure out how to share. But you'll begin sharing by saying, I'm a writer, and then you'll choose to share all of what you wrote, an excerpt, or just an idea. How did you feel? Or you can simply pass and say you don't wish to share. And we won't be doing any critiquing. We will just be celebrating each other's writing. And so before I put the link for the story map and set a time for our writing, I just want to share why we do this. And so each semester here in Southern Nevada, and sometimes during the summer in other locations, the Writing Project runs a Writing Institute. And it's where we bring teachers together to write with one another, to explore the teaching of writing, and to take our practice public. And one of the things I often hear from teachers is that they're looking for ways to do writing differently in their classroom. They know they don't love writing. They maybe even dislike teaching writing, but they're not sure what to do. And so one of the most basic premises of the Writing Project is the belief that the best teachers of writing are writers. And I found, during my time working with the Writing Project, that a lot of teachers, some teachers might say things like, I wrote during my undergrad or my graduate program, but there were research papers, but I'm not a writer. I write when I have to, but I'm not a writer. And so one of the identities that we encourage teachers to explore and develop is their identity as a writer. And what is a writer? It is simply a person who writes. And that's my invitation to you. At the end of this presentation, we'll talk about how this could apply in a classroom. I think there's a lot of opportunities, and I'll take your questions about how to set this up, etc. But for now, I would just like to share with all of you the link. It's also already in the agenda, but I invite you to head to the story map and take 15 minutes, choose a stop, write with one of the prompts. And so let's meet back here for sharing. So 15 minutes, right at, watch me do math out loud, 12:57. Okay, so 12:57 p.m. we will meet back here, and everyone go and write. We will meet. So I'm typing that in the chat. We'll move back here, go and write. Okay, so I'm gonna go and write as well. If you have questions, type them in the chat. Otherwise, happy exploring, pick a place in Las Vegas and see what's out there. All right, we have one more minute, so please finish your stop. Find a place to stop your writing for right now. And please wrap up, and I'll give further instructions in just a few moments. All right, it is 12:57. So I hope you are able to find one place that you could stop. Perhaps you stopped at multiple places and took a minute just to write. Um, During the chat, I didn't speak it aloud because I didn't want to interrupt your writing, but some of you may have said it. It would be wonderful if you are able, if you can, in just a moment, come off of mute. You can turn your video on and do some sharing. But if you can't, that's just fine. And we'll invite you to put something in the chat. So if you want to put something in the chat, you can go ahead and put it there, and we'll be sure to acknowledge it after we hear from a few of you who I hope can share. So again, the idea for sharing is you'll start by saying, I am a writer. That may feel unfamiliar to you, or maybe you identify strongly as a writer, but we always start with that. You read it, and at the end, we all say thank you. So this is a way to affirm our identity. So I will first acknowledge that Nikki, who can't come off of mute, said, I am a writer. And because she can't come off of mute, I would just like to read it in this space real quickly, if I may. So she chose to stop McCarran Airport. In 1 week, my daughter is flying to Missouri without me. She is 12 and not a baby anymore, so I might be struggling with this more than I care to admit. I know she is going to have a blast with her cousins, but this will be the first time that she goes away on her own. She's had the occasional sleepover and trips to grandparents' house, but this is the real deal. I now know how my parents felt when I was growing up. I spent every summer away in Kansas with my best friend's family. I adored my time away from Las Vegas heat with people that I considered family. Although I was away from my own family, this experience gave me the opportunity to spread my wings and be on my own. I guess that is the experience I am now passing on to my own daughter. So thank you very much, Nikki, for sharing that. If you want to share, you're just gonna have to turn your camera on or come off of mute so that we can see you, and then we'll just pass around the group. So Terry, I saw your camera came on. So would you like to share? And then Jay Bryce, we'll head to you afterwards. So, and then Dana. So Terry, Jay Bryce, Dana.
Certainly. I'm a writer. I am not going to, and I'm also not going to read you my entire piece. I also wrote about McCarran Airport, and I remember arriving in McCarran in 2012 for the National Council of Teachers of English annual convention. The conference that year was supposed to be held in Arizona, but due to Arizona's decision to ban Mexican American studies, we were all moved to Vegas. And seated with two other people on my way from the Midwest, I was regaled with stories about Vegas, a place I had never visited. As McCarran came into view, the woman seated next to me, who was not only a Vegas aficionado, but also an experienced Vegas visitor, could barely contain her excitement. What struck me was that while she was thrilled to be visiting a city that she obviously loved, she was equally excited at the thought of me visiting for the first time. Welcome to Vegas, kid, she told me.
Thank you, thank you. All right, and Jay Bryce, we will pass it to you.
Hi, everybody. My name's Judy, and I wrote about the Bellagio fountains. I wrote a haiku, and I wrote another kind of short verse. So whenever I think of the Bellagio fountains, it's one of the first places I like to always take visitors when they come to Las Vegas. I think it's just such a wonderful, beautiful kind of introduction to Vegas. So the first one was a haiku that I wrote. Majestic waters shooting high into the sky, feeling nostalgic. So kind of short and sweet there. And then the second one is, I just wrote, the powerful pulse of the waters dancing into the skies, jumping and reaching for the stars, rhythmic sounds that entrance, and take us to another world. City lights glisten all around. That's about it.
Thank you. And can I give you a nudge to affirm your identity as a writer, Judy?
Oh, yes, I am a writer.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Dana, we'll turn it over to you to share about your stop in writing.
Sure, I did McCarran Airport. I actually just revised the one I had done in the past. So I am a writer. I once read a quote that said, "Airports have seen more sincere kisses than wedding halls, and the walls of hospital have heard more prayers than church." McCarran is where it all started. In 1990, my entire family flew from Bronx, New York to McCarran to start a new life in Vegas. Though I wasn't born yet, I am frequently reminded as my 30 family members were the front page of the Review Journal with the headline, "Bronx Goes West," because they all bought houses next to each other in Italian tradition. Growing up, my dad worked out of town a lot, and I would always cry when dropping him off at McCarran with my mom and sisters. Many years later, I was the one who made my dad cry. After I graduated college, my 3 best friends and I pursued our dreams of going to Europe together. This was the first time my mom and dad would have an empty nest after 39 years, and even though it was only for a month, it was hard for me and them. After exploring 8 countries and 12 cities, it felt so comforting when the plan landed at McCarran, and I saw the slot machines, tequila advertisements, and my wonderful family. I'm a writer.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to go ahead and share next, but if there's anyone else who has written and you haven't put anything in the chat yet, we'd love to hear from you. You're also welcome to come off of mute and share as well. So I'll share what I wrote. My stop was at the Bellagio fountains. So I am a writer. I always tell people to stop by the Bellagio fountains first in Las Vegas because of all the concrete edifices and neon signs and other structures in Las Vegas. It's the Bellagio fountains that best encapsulates the spirit of this city. The fountains say, "This should not be," and yet it exists vibrantly anyways. I think that's why people flock to Las Vegas. Here they can live large, assume an identity that doesn't exist, but here it does. So I wonder how the fountains came to be, not the engineering behind the fountains, the massive amounts of water, the projections, the mechanics. I wonder about the moment the idea blinked into existence. The Mojave Desert isn't a walk in the park. Summer days reach 120 degrees, water is scarce to be found, certainly not in quantities ample for shooting into the sky. So one day, or was it night, someone thinks, let's put an 8-acre fountain in the middle of the desert. Were they immediately dismissed, laughed at, ridiculed, or called brilliant? I am a writer. Thank you. So I'm not seeing anything else in the chat, and I'm not seeing anyone else turn on their cameras. So I will take that to mean that our sharing is done for right now. And thank you, Christine, for snapping everyone. And so what I'd like to do is pull back the curtain a little bit and share with you about that resource that we use to create it. And so I'm going to share my screen. One of the links, actually right down here in the agenda, you can click on it later, will just take you to the Nightlab project page. And so, as I said, this is called Nightlab by the Northwestern University, and it's free. I used a school Google account to sign into it. But it is a program that creates tools that use like publicly available data, such as in this one, it was maps, to help you tell a story or to use as a resource. And so I'm not going to talk about any of the other ones today other than the one we used, but they have a program called Juxtapose, which uses satellite data, and you can tell it where to go, and you can use it to track changes over time with a slider. The one we used today was called Storymap, but they also have one for timeline. And so with the Storymap, you can create stops that will help you go around a place. And so for our purposes, we're using it to explore a city, and it can be used with people who are familiar with the city and people who aren't familiar with the city. But it could also be used to track, for example, a nonfiction unit, which one of you mentioned, I think Dana, it was you mentioned in the chat, nonfiction, you know, what are historical events? Where did they happen? You know, how did they go from point A to point B? And so with each one, as you saw, which which we did, you have the opportunity to write about it, to put text and links in there, etc. And so you can see over here on the left-hand side, that is a map of Las Vegas. If that wasn't perhaps something you recognize because you're not from the city, these are our major freeways. This is the Las Vegas Strip. And as you go around, it does zoom in on certain ones more than others, but it highlights the streets. And so again, what Nightlab does is it's created these programs that use information like Google Maps, and it takes them and allows you to manipulate them in a way that tells stories. And so this could be used because you're a teacher and you're leading students on a journey. For those of you with perhaps older students, it could be something that they compile together and sort of create their own writing stops around a unit of study. And these maps could be centered around the entire globe. They need not be centered just around Las Vegas. So I did want you to know about that as a resource because I think it's incredibly useful. And also there are other things in the Nightlab. So I was very excited a year ago when I first found out about this resource, and I've enjoyed using it for this specific purpose, but also introducing it to teachers who can use it in their classroom in other ways. One final thing before we get to Q&A. One of the things I like to do, and this works particularly better in much larger groups, virtual groups as well, is if we could just share waterfall sharing, and that is a golden line. So even for those who shared, but particularly and also for those who weren't able to share, if you could just find a sentence or a phrase, something that just really stood out that you wrote, I just want to acknowledge those and collect those in the chat. So for example, I'm typing in my golden line was, I wonder about the moment the idea blinked into existence. So I put that into the chat. That is my golden line. I just invite you to choose a line and then place that there so we can collect them in the chat, just as a final celebration of the writing that we did. And then I'm going to drop an exit ticket in there, and then we'll close with Q&A. Rhythmic sounds that take us to another world. Thank you, Judy. Something that shouldn't exist when talking of the fountain. After exploring 8 countries and 12 cities, it felt so comforting when the plane landed at McCarran and I saw the slot machines, tequila advertisements, and my wonderful family. Thank you, Dana. What struck me was that while she was excited to be visiting a city she obviously loved, she was also thrilled at the thought of me visiting for the first time. Thank you, Terry. Let's fly over the sad clouds and kiss the warmth of the sun. Let's travel far from here and keep going until our journey is done. Thank you so much, Brianda. All right, well, it is 10 till the end of the session, and I believe it is common practice for us to ask questions and discuss, but right before we get there, I would sure love if you could quickly click on that link to the ticket out the door. It asks for 3 brief, 4, 5, but easy. It's your name, who are you, your email, and then what worked well for you in today's session, what's one thing you could use in your classroom, and what questions remain. If you could answer any or all of those, I would sure appreciate it. I know a few of you mentioned that you are local here in Las Vegas and you were interested in learning more about the writing project. I'd be happy to connect with you. As I said, we have a writing institute for teachers that will soon be starting. And if you filled out that exit ticket, it would be a really wonderful place. And then quickly, while you're doing that, I do want to honor the golden lines that both Nikki and Christine just put in the chat. Nikki's not a baby anymore. Thank you, Nikki and Christine. I chose to write story starters to help my students think creatively before they begin writing. I wrote dialogues. Here's one. I've never seen such a diverse group of people in one spot at the same time. And so that was at the Las Vegas sign. So thank you, Christine. So maybe take 2 minutes if you could do quick feedback on that ticket out the door, and then I'll turn things over to you, Terry, for any questions.
Hey, Ben, I have a question. Have you ever used the timeline feature on Nightlab?
I'm not familiar. I've used a similar program, but I have not used Timeline with Nightlab.
Oh, okay. I'm thinking though that might be good for maybe like upper elementary, like when we're doing biographies or whatnot.
One thing I think a lot about with the tools, in my experience with this current Nightlab tool, I found it to be very intuitive. And also I recognize that, like, you know, my skills are probably far more, I mean, I don't say this like in a prideful way, but I probably can do more than maybe like an early or late elementary student. And so one of the things I was thinking about are ways in which, like, you know, the teacher could help like collaborate, in the sense of, like, if students, you know, did sort of an entering, you know, story map, they saw how it worked, the teacher had created a few stops, maybe it's the beginning of a story or a unit in nonfiction or history they're studying, then perhaps the students themselves could design their own. You know, they could say, here's the picture we want, here's the text we want, here's the links we want. And then it could sort of be something where the teacher, you know, could more quickly put that in there. And then it could be like a collaborative sharing piece, in the sense of maybe it's a full class presentation, you know, each person presents, you know, their piece of whatever, or, you know, it becomes something that's shared and the kids are, you know, excited to share it. And you know, maybe they have an opportunity like we did to explore the different parts. It could be used for like academic learning. I think it could also be used in a more like classroom culture building. I wouldn't like ask like where you live or something, but you know, if it was like food you like, or you know, a place you want to go someday, you know, something that's very accessible to all students. That could be another way that's not necessarily you know, deep or steeped in a unit, but it could help bring students together.
Almost like a jigsaw, like what you were saying earlier, like I like that a lot. That's good. Thank you.
Thanks for the question.
And if anyone else has questions, please, you're welcome to, you know, unmute and turn on the camera and ask, or you can type them in the chat. While people are thinking of questions, Ben, I had a question for you about, you know, Storymap and Nightlab. Like, I think this is a wonderful way of kind of adapting, you know, to the situation that we're finding ourselves in, where we can't easily travel to other places. Is Nightlab, you know, or Storymap in particular, being used at with other writing projects in other states, or was this something that you know, your project just decided to adopt kind of on its own?
So the idea came from the national network, and so last summer during the pandemic, so I guess like an example would be that typically at every national writing project conference, and they have regional conferences, national, there'll always be a writing marathon. So one time I went to a regional conference of their national writing project in Louisiana, and in New Orleans, we did a writing marathon in New Orleans with, you know, other writing educators. And it was a really exciting experience to be in a place. And so the national network, knowing that no one could do this because of the pandemic, came together, and that's where they created Right Across America. And I'm going to drop that in the chat. And so last summer they had stops at cities all around the country, and each city used the Storymap program in different ways. And it was really cool to see the different ways, you know, people had used them, sites had used them. But they invited you to do the story map and then share with others. And so you were traveling to different cities. And so I put the link in there. If you are interested in it, you can still sign up. There are, you know, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 more stops this summer. So you can register to go on them, but they'll all use story maps. And what I mean by each site approaches it differently. You know, one site last year, I think it was Louisville, decided to do theirs based around food. So it was all about like the history of food in that city. More recently, I know that in, oh my goodness, the city is on the tip of my tongue, but it's not here. Too many, oh my goodness. Another city whose name is escaping me specifically, I don't know whether it was in Minnesota or it was in Kentucky, but theirs was focused around social justice, and it was around like the pains of the people in that city through history and ways in which, like, you know, in sort of our present time, you know, there are, you know, community groups beginning dialogues and pursuing justice and healing. And so that was their specific focus. I chose a very specific focus just around tourism with the one that I created for Las Vegas. I thought it was unique since you're not all coming together to be in the city this time. So that was kind of, maybe that answered your question.
No, that's great. We have about 3 minutes left if anyone has any other questions. The other thing that I wanted to just note, because I love watching this in the chat, is that we have some people who are thinking about collaborating with each other.
That's awesome.
So that's fantastic.
It's exciting to see. I'm glad you're both connecting, Judy and Christine.
Since it doesn't look like we have any other questions, Ben, do you want to, is there a link that you want to give people if they want to find more information on the Las Vegas Writing Project, or any other information you want to share with them?
It's so snwp.org is our website. We're also on Facebook and Twitter. And I just, again, I will share, if you are a teacher in Las Vegas specifically, we offer the Writing Institute in the fall for teachers. It is a class at UNLV, and I can pass on an informational flyer with you just to think about. But if you're not from Las Vegas, I would really encourage you to look up what your local writing project site is. And if you are interested in growing as a writer and growing as a teacher of writing, or if you have an interest in writing, to contact your local writing project site. There is a really unique, vibrant network of educators. So I encourage you to reach out.
Wonderful. Well, Ben, thank you so much. This has been a fantastic session. I have been doing a lot of writing for like some academic writing lately, so it's nice to have the opportunity to do some more creative writing. And thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you so much, everybody. Have a good day. Is there any other duty or responsibility that I have? Okay.
No, I don't think so.
Any loose end I need to tie up? Thank you very, very much for sharing, Terry, and thank you so much for your help with the hosting.
This was fantastic.
Yep. All right, and I wish you well for the rest of the conference. Unfortunately, I'm not able to attend very much of it, which is my loss. It was such a joy. I think 2 years ago was the last time I attended, so hopefully soon. So, all right, take care.
Thank you.
All right, I am going to shut down the room, and then I will reopen in 1 moment.
Okay, see you in a bit, Larry.
See you in a second.